Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. Glad to see everyone. Welcome. This is a healthy group for a Friday afternoon in the summer and prime vacation season. I just sent an email to a bunch of people and got dozens of out of office messages back instantly. So between Juneteenth and summer vacations, a lot of folks are out of the office today. So we're really glad you could make it. I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Elisa Laird, and I work for AHEAD, and we're hosting this book club today for the coalition. So I don't have much to say, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the microphone over to Lisa Meeks, who will get us started.
Great. And Kristina, do you want to start?
Sure, I would love to. Thanks, Lisa. Thank you, Elisa, as well. We are excited to be here. Welcome to all of you. This is the June meeting of the Equal Access Book Club. I'm Kristina Petersen. Of course, you know, this is also Lisa Meeks. We'll be introducing ourselves more officially in just a moment. Just want to kind of give you an overview for those of you who maybe haven't gotten to attend one of these book clubs in the past. When the Guide to Assisting Students with Disabilities, Equal Access in Health Science and Professional Education was published in 2015, it really filled a gap for those of us that were involved with the education of students with disabilities in the health sciences. But since then, so much more has been written about students with disabilities and accommodations. So we're really excited to bring you this book club series that reviews the second edition, which includes a lot more information.
Great. And today we're going to be covering chapter 6, which is the process of requesting accommodations on certification, licensing, and board exams, assisting students through the application. And the original authors were myself, Nira Jane, and Colleen Lewis from Columbia had contributions.
Great. So we will go ahead and introduce ourselves. We are the moderators. Again, I'm Kristina Petersen. And at New York Medical College, I'm an assistant professor in the biochemistry department. I'm also an assistant dean of academic support. So in addition to teaching, I lead a team that focuses on all aspects of academic support, including supporting students who receive accommodations within all our health science programs. And just for context, those health science programs include a number of different degrees, including dental, medical, physical therapy, speech language, public health, and master's and PhD programs in health sciences. So I've really also enjoyed working on several research projects with Dr. Meeks, and I'm also a co-author on 2 chapters in Disability as Diversity, which is the guidebook for inclusion in medicine, nursing, and health professions recently released. And I'm also honored to be serving as the president-elect for the Coalition for Disability Access in Health Science Education. I'm excited to be here.
Great. And my name is Lisa Meeks, and this is the first time I think publicly that I get to say I am an associate professor of psychiatry and family medicine at the University of Colorado Medical School. So exciting changes, and I still hold an adjunct position as a assistant professor of family medicine at the University of Michigan. So we're super happy to be with you today. I think, you know, I would be remiss. People are always saying, oh, your book or your article, and it takes a village. And I just have an amazing group of incredible co-authors, co-editors. So this publication would not be possible without Elisa Laird, who you just met, and Nira Jane, and a wealth of people who dedicated their time and talents and efforts towards this edition of the book. And so I just want to thank them so much for their contributions.
And this Equal Access Book Club series would not exist without the support of several key groups. So we'd like to highlight and give them great appreciation. Ahead, of course, the Association on Higher Education and Disability. Their assistance in the use of the Zoom platform is invaluable to us in this series. We have many, many wonderful examples of collaboration with them on so many events and are grateful to them. The Coalition for Disability Access and Health Science Education, which is also a co-sponsor, designated interpreters who are doing the captioning today. We are grateful for your service. And Springer Publications, which is the publisher of this book. And we're very grateful to Springer and designated interpreters and the Coalition and Ahead for their support of this novel way of exploring the second edition of the Equal Access book for students with disabilities.
Great. And I just want to interject off script for just one moment and say to all of you listening today that want to get involved in this amazing work and in this amazing space, that Kristina Petersen made the mistake of standing up at a coalition event, I think 4 years ago, raising her hand and making a comment. And I was like, you're going to regret this. And since then has been published multiple times over and is now the president-elect of the coalition. So it just goes to show you that we love to have people put themselves out there and want to get involved. And we welcome, our village has space for everyone, and we welcome more and more people getting involved. So just as a plug for the coalition and for the work in general, if you ever want to get involved in a way that it relates to academic scholarship or producing something like the book club, please let us know. We're always looking for people. So you guys are probably experts at this already. This is our 6th webinar, but it goes. It's important to repeat, and it goes without saying that we expect everyone to be super respectful in this space, but we were just talking about what a wonderful audience you are before we opened up the webinar, and everyone shares resources. We encourage you to continue to do that. So as we're talking about resources, so many of you have so much that we don't even know about. So please crowdsource in that chat. But just a reminder, as moderators, our role is to pose questions. Although we may have expertise, we're going to try to keep our mouths shut and elevate all of you and get you to really engage and talk and share experiences. But we'll definitely be supporting you throughout. Please be civil and respectful. We want to encourage everyone. People have different opinions and different experiences, and we welcome those and we honor and respect those. And I think, most importantly, we can all learn from each other. No matter how much work Kristina and I have done in this space, we are learners first. And so we know that we have a lot to learn. We all do. And, the experiences with these high stakes exams are sometimes they just seem so, pointless, and we have no idea why a decision was made. So we're all gonna come together today and learn a bit and support one another. And we'd love to hear from all of you. To participate, please raise your hand using the Zoom hand raise feature. And Elisa behind the scenes is going to do some magical stuff where she lets you talk and encourages you to do so. If you do not want your name associated with your question or comment, there is an opportunity for you to do this anonymously. And so in this way, we might be able to support people who, we have extroverts and introverts, and we want everyone to be able to participate. If you want to just type your question in the chat, Elisa can read that aloud, and you can do that anonymously. And so we just encourage everyone to participate in the way that feels good for them. And as a reminder, everyone who is joining us today, so everyone that comes in before the end of the series will be put into a drawing, and we will randomly select for a few books to give away at the end of the series. So, and if you're enjoying this series, please give us some feedback, because we'd love to keep it going with some additional books. All right, so with that, I think we're going to get started.
Okay, great. So that brings us to question 1. So everybody consider this, and hopefully we'll have some robust participation in the discussion. So the question number 1 says, each exam agency has its own application process for exam accommodations. Within the programs offered at your institution, what is the process for each agency? So of course, this will be unique to each of you, depending on what programs you have. Be sure to outline the timeline, documentation required, including any specific direction regarding what medical or neuropsychological tests or results are acceptable, requirements of recentness of documentation, personal statement instructions, directions for how to schedule an exam date, and the appeals process. So there's a lot in that question. Does anyone want to get started and tackle perhaps one?
And for this format, just a summary would be good.
Yes. So while everyone's encouraged to do this work on their own and doing a nice list that's totally comprehensive, I think for here, if we can just do a summary, that's wonderful.
And I see that Marie Lusk, one of our esteemed executive board members, is raising her hand. Do we want to, Lisa, can we give her permission to chat?
I believe I do have permission. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hello, good to see everyone. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
I have found, so Rush University is a private health science university. So we have medicine, nursing, nurse practitioner, PA, OT, LMNOP. We have a lot of things. So I have found for medicine, which I think has been very helpful for me, is when I'm starting with a new incoming medical student. Starting at that time, I almost start their intake with their beginning and with the ending of their program to say, okay, you just gave me all of your updated neuropsychs from undergrad, your previous accommodations from other institutions. You did my request for accommodations. You've given me your personal information, your report of how your disability impacts you. We're going to talk about what we need at Rush, but let's really dive into what you're going to need for your boards, because that's going to be a beast that we have to plan for. So I put my students the summer between M1 and M2 year. I have my students work on for 3 months. I have a template for them to do their personal statement. I give them a template, even with like the running head with their NBME number, their last name, and how they should start their statement, and all the documentations that they're going to have to add into. So at the beginning, if I see, hey, this documentation is kind of getting old, I'm going to tell them right then before they start medical school, you need to make an appointment and find out, are you on your parents' insurance, the university's insurance? Is it going to be out of pocket? Is this going to be a financial burden? And we talk about that obstacle, because my goal is for them to not have to do everything last minute. I tell them by no later than Halloween of their second year in medical school, everything is ready to submit. So that way we have that time before medical school begins and they're all of their M1 year and that summer to work on all of this documentation and time for their personal statement. And it's worked well for at least my scheduling, that I can put in my Outlook calendar, remind your M1s, it's time to start prepping this. Or did we get a follow-up documentation from this student who's going to be using it for their STEP exams? And that's for usually the students with the learning disabilities, the ADHD. My chronic health students, I'm finding their documentation is much more cut and dry and not so elaborate as those neuropsychological evaluations. So I have noticed a personal difference. And I've seen that process has kept us on a timeline, and it's helped, I think, the students too with smaller benchmarks along the way. Like, it's not all of this at once. It's okay, right now get me all of your information for the first semester. Send me everything. Talk to your parents, have them go back to your high school, primary school, blood types, letters from your second grade teacher, everything that you can get, and send it over to me, and I will organize. I tell the students, if you give me everything, I can scan it in. I will get the PDF organized for you, because they have enough on their plate. So that's something I'm happy to do. But again, I realize I'm at a smaller institution, more like a boutique caseload. So I can do that. That may not always be the case, but for now it's working. So that's what I have found, that it worked for me to set deadlines for both parties. And we have responsibilities to each other to meet these deadlines, so we can turn everything in on time. And that gives us time, if they get denied, that we have still time for an appeal before they have to hit their crash benchmark for the next semester.
That's wonderful.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. Love your show.
Thank you for sharing, Marie. We even had somebody somebody sent in the chat asking if there was any chance that you'd be willing to share the template or even an outline of the template. So I don't know what the answer is to that question, Marie. We leave that up to you, but it sounds like your colleagues have really appreciated a lot of what you said. I think from my perspective, it's awesome to do that and be so organized ahead of time. That's wonderful. You were going to say something, Marie?
Yes, I'm happy to share a template. If I'll put my email in if someone wants to reach out to me.
Awesome. Thank you, Marie.
No problem.
That's great. And I'll add to that, we have the UCSF guide that we had shared so freely with everyone and encouraged you to give it to your students. And we actually have a small team that includes Kristina Petersen that is going to be revising that. So we should have that done in the next 3 months and available. So Marie, we may actually knock on your door if you've got a template and see if you want to add it to that guide. We're taking it away from UCSF, claiming ownership of it again, and we're going to update it for the coalition and for Summit and get that updated, because there obviously lots and lots of changes with curriculum and when people are taking it and going to pass fail for medicine and lots going on. So yeah, I think that would be great. Awesome. Thanks, Marie. Thanks for kicking us off with such a robust, complete answer.
Is there anyone else that wanted to say anything? I do notice that in the chat, Dr. Murray has weighed in that he loves associating board exam paperwork preparation with a Halloween deadline. It's scary, but time to have a little fun. Thank you, Dr. Murray, for making us smile.
Dr. Murray always makes us smile. Should we go on to number 2? All right. Okay, so when students apply for accommodations on certification, licensing, and board examinations, some of the exam agencies ask the schools, I love how we wrote these, some agencies ask the school to provide information about the educational accommodations that they received by the student there at your program. What, if any, additional role does the DRP, so Disability Resource Professional, that's the term we use kind of broadly in the coalition and in our publications, so DRP, currently play in supporting students who are applying for accommodations? Are there any additional things the office could do? Cindy, you're on this show, as Marie said. You're on.
Do I win a prize for being on the show? One of the things that I do, and this is from the UCSF guide, is help the students with their personal letter. And we go through multiple iterations of that to make sure that students aren't saying things like, I need accommodations to do my best. And to make sure that we're focusing on access rather than
absolutely. Our poor students, sometimes they spend so much time on those letters and they sink themselves almost before they can even get out the door with some of the things that they've said. And we understand certainly why they're saying these things, but I do want to make a plug. This is a good time to make a plug for the updated book and chapter 6, where Neera Jane has done a tremendous job with a new appendices. Cindy, I don't know if you have the updated book and you've seen this appendices, but it's personal statement prompts, because so often the students have difficulty even thinking about, like, how do I write about this? What do I say? How do I position this? And so we have a whole new section that's designed for students by Dr. Jane, and that's been super helpful, I think.
It looks like Megan Seamers Livingston has her hand up.
Hey, Megan.
Do we have allowed to talk? Okay, I think we should have her. Do we have Megan?
You're on mute, Megan.
Hello, how are you all?
Hi,
Megan.
Megan.
So our office, we work with the students on their letter of support, and we also help them with the time frame in which they need to apply by. So as early as the summer prior to their second year, really just supporting them with that time frame, making sure that they have all of their documentation and that they're starting their personal statement, as it can be a lengthy process. And a lot of the times they're not focusing on it while they're, during their courses. So just helping them with the timeline, the letter of support, getting some case law together, as Dr. Petersen and I have done over the last couple of years, and just being their coach.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Megan. So Megan, as you can see, is from my office. So that was not planned, but thank you, Megan, for sharing that. Yeah. So just as has been described, I think helping students kind of outline what needs to be done. I also really appreciated Cindy's comment about the language within the personal statement being important.
So I see that Marie Lusk has added a comment and said that for question 2, I think we also have to discuss what happens if you're denied. What would that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're going to get to appeals, but we certainly can kind of fast forward there. It looks like we lost Lisa to some technology issues. I'm sure she'll be back in a moment. So, oh, here comes Lisa. So hi, Lisa. Oh, we are muted, but I'm glad you're back. I was nervous when I saw you froze. I thought, am I the one frozen or is she the one frozen? So anyway, I'm glad you're back.
Kristina said, what happens if one of us loses Wi-Fi? And I was like, that's not going to happen. It's going to be fine. And Elisa was like, we'll just roll with it. And then when it went down, I thought, oh my God, we just told her it wasn't going to happen.
That's all right. We're flexible here. It's a Friday afternoon. So hopefully everybody's in a decent mood today and be forgiving to us. So what Marie was just saying through the chat was that, gosh, well, what about appeals? But I think we have that a little bit later, if I'm not mistaken, in our questions. Am I right?
Yes.
So if it's okay, Marie, we're going to defer that to a few more questions, but we would love to hear your thoughts on appeals in just a few moments. So I think if there are, okay, Marie says that's okay. So thank you, Marie. So anybody else have anything to say about question 2 before we move to question 3? We have 8 questions to get through, so we have plenty of things to talk about. Anyone else? I don't see any other hands. So unless there's any other burning thoughts, then we'll move to question 3.
Yes, there was one thought I had, and it had to do with someone, I think it was Marie, saying how much time she spends her boutique institution, which I'm a huge fan of Rush. Everybody knows that. So she is absolutely in heaven there. But this is part of why we have the 1 to 85 caseload. So if you're a DRP working and you have a caseload of 200, 300, 400 people, let us help you. We're going to be sending out a survey soon about that. And again, we absolutely say that your caseload needs to be no more than 85. You can have a little bit of wiggle room, but it's no joke that assisting these students, especially for NBME, can take up to 10 hours of time. So it's a big commitment, but the payoff is incredible when you do it this way. So I just want to say that, and I'm happy to talk to anybody's boss about that and about getting you a raise and anything else you need. All right, question 3, Kristina.
All right, question 3. Thank you, Lisa. I'm sure we could all use some advocacy from someone like Dr. Meeks on our team. Okay, question 3 says, when working with students to prepare for certification, licensing, and board examinations, it's critical to understand the details of how the exam is administered. So where would you find the relevant information about each exam format, rules governing what students may or may not bring into the exam, the length of the exam, the break schedule, the nature of any practical components? And then how does your institution work with students in advance to prepare them for that format, and also potentially the barriers, right, that might be presented by that form, any of those details of the format? And is there more that you could do? I'm sure there's always more we could do, but gosh, we'd love to hear your ideas and see what you guys are already doing. And maybe we can learn from each other and expand our horizons a bit. So anybody have some thoughts? Cindy says Google knows it all. So I'm guessing that means, Cindy, that you go online and you check each individual site, which of course is what we do as well, and what the book recommends is that you look very clearly at each site for whichever program you're looking at, and try and find all of this information. So anybody else have any other? I mean, the book is a great resource, right? And there's a wonderful table in the book that I think is helpful. Oh, we've got Terry Edwards.
Terry.
Hi.
Hi, Terry.
Hi, Terry.
How are you?
Hello. Doing fine.
Excellent.
Just this last week, I had an incoming M1 student contact me about the new technology that's used on their phone for their insulin pump. And that keeps getting changed, it keeps getting added, updated apps and that sort of thing. And so being at a loss, because I wanted to make sure that we were having him do the same thing as would be required for STEP, I just went ahead and called NBME and I said, hey, technology keeps changing. Can we have a conversation about this? I would like to recommend to the student that they go ahead and do whatever you guys are going to recommend. And they said, hey, we're not going to allow the phone. The phone can't even be at the proctor station. The proctor's got to be in their locker. So they really do need to be talking to their provider about a different monitoring device. And so now I can take that to the student and say, I suggest you think about this, but this is what NBME is going to tell you for certain.
Yeah. Which really stinks, because now the NBME is dictating how someone manages their health, right? Which is completely unfair. But I think that, you know, it's important. And I think this goes back to what Marie was saying too, is about informing people of things immediately and making sure that they know so they have time to plan for this. Stress can throw off blood sugar. So that's something to really think about.
I mean, I think, Terry, I think it's great you went ahead and proactively contacted them directly, since it, you know, it could, it's not clear if something like that would be a personal item exemption, or because it's a phone, it's also technically against the other rules. And so I mean, I think you're right. I think in those sorts of issues, contacting them directly as opposed to trying to interpret what's on their website or what isn't on their website probably was, I think, was the best way to get the direct line to the information. So in the interest of your student, I commend you for that. And but at the same time, I'm sorry to hear that they're not willing to kind of go with some of the innovations of technology. It looks like Cindy has her hand up. So
I just wanted to say that over the years, when I've contacted the NBME, whether it was through email or through a phone call, they've been incredibly good at emailing back quickly or trying to answer the question right away. That's something that I don't usually find in different agencies. And so as much frustration as I've had and others have had with the NBME, they are very responsive. You don't always hear what you want, but they do answer.
I've had the same experience. I think, Kristina, you've had the same experience. You know, they are responsive, and I've never had difficulty when I called. You know, they're always willing to get back to us with an answer.
And then Robert in the chat has also pointed out that the USMLE Bulletin of Information also has comprehensive information about what is allowed, what isn't allowed. And that also can be found online, and it's a PDF document online. Any other thoughts on this one?
Just remember, when you're putting your argument together, that DRP letter of support, knowing the test format is critical to understanding what the barrier is, because they don't care about diagnosis, as we've all seen in letters of rejection. It is truly a barrier-driven process, functional limitation barrier. If you don't know the test format or you don't understand what they're testing, you're going to have a hard time explaining why there's a barrier. And it's especially helpful to understand the differences between the MCAT and the step 1 exam, and why a student might perform okay on the MCAT and still have a significant barrier on step 1 or step 2. And of course, this is specific to medicine, but.
I agree.
Right.
Understand. All right. So should we move to question 4?
Yeah.
I think we might actually make it through 8 questions today, which is great.
That's remarkable. I'm waiting for my UNLV folks to start speaking up. They're usually super engaged, and I think they're on the call. So I'm hoping to hear from them soon. When updated or new testing medical documentation is necessary to support an exam agency accommodation request, how can the DRP help the student find a local evaluator or healthcare provider and work with financial aid if necessary to help fund the testing? Once an evaluator has been identified with the student's permission, how might the DRP assist the provider in fully understanding the nature of the documentation required by the respective exam agencies? And how can you help them understand that certain tests are not considered valid, and that the need to enumerate as many diagnostic details as possible to justify the diagnosis? What do we think? Okay, how many of you, greetings to UNLV, how many of you, raise your hand all at once, we won't call on you to speak, I promise, but how many of you have ghostwritten some things for providers or helped them with a little editing to show them how this is done, or perhaps showed them an example letter to show the obviously redacted, to show the amount of details that are necessary? Okay, we've got a couple of people that are endorsing that they have done this kind of ghostwriting. In this new revised workbook, we actually have a DRP learning specialist who is amazing and came up with an entire checklist for evaluators. And so that's going to be added to that updated list. And that's going to be an amazing new resource that we've never had. And it will be something that you can actually give the provider to say, these are the things you need to watch out for, just like we give that to students. So, whoa, that's an option. Yes, that is an option. I think it's important to be very careful when you're speaking with a provider who is licensed to provide, this information, and but I think it's an educational process, just like all the education that we do across campuses, which is to let them know, look, the NBME or whomever, I understand that. I think the physical therapy one is pretty difficult as well. They're not playing. When they say they need this, they need it. And so many, especially physicians, are guilty of this. Think that if they write a letter, it's just going to solve all of the issues, that somebody's going to listen to them because they're a doctor. That's not how it works. You actually have to justify the decision making and the recommendations. So remember this. And when you're doing your intakes, to kind of add to what Marie was saying, start justifying it in your intake notes so that you can go back to those and utilize that when you're filling out that certification, because you're going to need it.
I just want to add one more thought to that, is just, I can't tell you how many times it's been, I've been sad to see in various denial letters that I've seen from schools throughout the nation, we'll just say, I won't say which ones, but just that, there's a sentence from a provider that talks about a learning style as opposed to a barrier, a disability related barrier. And literally I go through when we get our reports, if the provider's willing to take some feedback, and I look for those sentences, because I don't want any of those to be quoted back to my student as a reason for, or at least as part of the justification for denial. So looking at the language, also remembering that the clinicians are used to not putting a lot of details in letters, because they're used to, people being more concerned about not divulging detail, not because of HIPAA protections. But in this case, it's a very different kind of letter than what they're used to writing. So they may need a little bit of support and feedback. So we do have a few folks that are ready to speak. It looks like Marie is already ready to speak, and then we've got Kelly and Brian kind of on deck.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. I think that goes back to kind of us being prepared with the type of credentialing bodies or entities that our students are going up against. And I know I shouldn't be in us versus them, but sometimes I feel like we are really competing for these approval letters. And taking the time as a DRP to go through, if you have a PA program, talk to your director of your PA program and say, what is your credentialing body? I just want to confirm. And then you as a DRP go through and read about the accommodation process and read, okay, the students are going to have X, Y, and Z, and then have a quick tab on your computer. And so that's what I've done for all of my programs, because as the longer I've been at Rush, the more students from different programs have been seeking accommodations for different sorts of things. Sorry, my husband was calling there. And so that was really helpful with just kind of getting an understanding, because some documentation does need to be written very specifically. And so to be able to tell a student, you can take this information to your provider and show them, this is exactly what the credentialing body is going to expect me to produce within the next 2 years. If they're up for an evaluation, they could bring all of this. And I don't think that's in a way we're telling the doctor or the provider what to write. It's just to say, here's a diagnosis, but we need to showcase it in this format. So I think that's something as a DRP, I realize my caseload and the boutiqueness of my institution some days, and I can do that. But I think it's worthwhile knowing and having quick tabs that you can check where these are, and also knowing for yourself when the students will be eligible to take their exams. Are they only offered once a year, twice a year? That may be helpful when you're doing your intake for scheduling down the road.
Thank you, Marie. We have Brian as well. Brian, you should be able to speak. Give us a shout. Let's see. Can we hear you?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Hi, Brian.
Very good. So I think where I can add value is saying some of what other folks have said, right? So getting to know the universe of providers in your local area, and are they open to learning and understanding what the students who are also clients need? And so we've done it kind of every way you can do it. We have an internal clinic here on campus that trains doctoral students to do psychoeducational assessments. So they really see value in being able to give a variety of assessments and do the training piece. So they've been willing to learn about the credentialing bodies and even finding out some of the subtests that they really like to see. And then where we've went and gotten a win-win is, even for our undergrad population, there's always more of a need for testing than there are resources to test. So we were able to get some of our health science programs to fund trainee positions. And basically, our health science students come first, and then any extra availability is used to provide assessment for students in a low-cost way that might not be able to afford testing in the community. And it's really worked for us, but we still have challenges too. But I think that the big things are assessors who know how the documentation is going to be used, and then understanding the timeliness and timelines, right? We have one low-cost provider in the community who does really good work at a really good rate, but that organization may have a 6-month wait before they can get a psychoed completed. So I think it's really looking at all of those things and then giving advice to students about which avenues are going to work best for them.
That's really great. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, our office, we definitely have some folks that we've identified as being especially helpful and especially receptive. And so we definitely have a list that we provide students. I think it's wonderful. It sounds like the kind of collaboration that you've put together with the different campuses. And I didn't catch what institution you're from, Brian? Did you catch it?
I'm one of those troublemakers from UNLV that Lisa was talking about.
Excellent.
I love my UNLV people.
Awesome. Hey, we love it. We're big on troublemakers here. So thank you for sharing. Anybody else have thoughts on this one? Watching.
This is
the hands.
Elisa. I saw there was some robust chat going on over there with Lisa and a couple folks. Maybe Lisa can just summarize what was going on over there so that in case folks weren't watching the chat and also listening.
Great. Thank you for the recommendation. I think just when we do our training and we teach about how to read the psychoeducational evaluations and how the NBME is reading it, they're using the average person standard. And so an average person is going to fall anywhere score-wise. So if you're looking at standard scores between 25th percentile and the 75th percentile, that's average. So if you're arguing learning disability, you need to be looking for scores that are in that bottom quartile. And if they're not there, chances are your student's not going to be able to make an argument that's sufficient to be approved for NBME exams, at least. So we're looking at really low scores. And what Cindy was asking, which is what so many people have, is that the evaluators are using a discrepancy-based model instead of an average person standard. So they're looking at, does the IQ match the educational achievement? And if it doesn't, is there a statistical difference between what the student is achieving on their IQ scores and what they're achieving on these, like a Woodcock-Johnson or something like that? They're using that data. That is not robust enough to make this argument. Moreover, the kind of discrepancy model that looks at within IQ, so are you, performance, those types of things, the subtest of IQs, that's also not a good enough argument. So if you're looking at something like processing speed, something of that nature that's coming from the IQ score, you still need to use that less, the lower quartile of scores under 25th percentile. And so if you're not seeing scores in that space, it is highly, highly unlikely that your student is going to get approved, because what they're being compared to as far as being determined to be and the average between 25th and 75th percentile. I think the other thing that is super, super important to remember is that I would never suggest that you use the NBME standards to make decisions at your medical school. Is it going to cause some disconnect between like accommodations on step 1 and accommodations in medical school? Yes, but I don't think you withhold accommodations, especially when they're clearly needed, because downstream, somebody else is not going to aspire to your same adjudication of this kind of student case. And I think we've seen a couple of successful cases, legal cases, over the last few years. And so we can always hold out hope. But what I was saying to Cindy is that, sometimes it's strategy. If a student's presenting with multiple disabilities, sometimes it's choosing not to take that LD paperwork and submit it, but instead to focus on another disability that would eventuate in the same accommodation and make that argument, which you can make a lot more robustly, and just don't even worry about the LD paperwork if you're looking at the same accommodation outcomes. So it's a lot of it is strategy, and there's a ton of nuance. I don't want to pretend that it's as easy as saying yes, no, this kind of thing, but I do think it's an art form that you learn. I don't know, Kristina, if you would agree or disagree or have other points. I think you kind of learn it as you go. And so after 10 or 12 years of doing it, you just get a sense. With that being said, I would never not support a student who wants to apply. I think that's terrible. So, if a student wants to apply, you support the student no matter what.
Absolutely. I think we support students in applications, and we put our best foot forward and do the best we can to advocate and focus on those things that we can really focus on within whatever their test results are. But yes, I think you kind of get used to figuring out which pieces to emphasize. One thing that I want to mention is there is a question in the Q&A, and this portion I think is especially relevant to this part of the conversation. How can we learn which tests are not considered valid by the NBME or the NBOME? So I think that part of the question, there's other portions to that. It's a very long question, but I think that is important as well for folks to know, for us as DRPs to know. So the one that I have run into over many, many years is the Nelson-Denny test. And it's not so much that they won't look at the Nelson-Denny test and that the provider shouldn't do the Nelson-Denny test, because it is, but that they want to see it in conjunction with other tests. And so usually what we try and do is have the SATA as well as the Woodcock-Johnson, that if there is a Nelson-Denny test, that there's also similar results in the Woodcock-Johnson, and there's similar results in the SATA reading portions of the test. Now, that's one that I've come across, and I know that one actually is now written up in the directions on their website, where they specifically say, you know, basically
Don't use it.
Don't use it.
Yeah.
And I know neuropsychologists don't necessarily like to hear that, but if I've found that they're more receptive, instead of me saying don't use it, just say, okay, well then use Woodcock-Johnson and SATA and Nelson-Denny, and then you have all three of them. And then they're more—
Unless the Nelson-Denny has different results and they're going to default to arguing the Nelson-Denny results because it's one of the tests that you can time and untime, I would say just don't use it. They hate it. The psychometrics are impossible to support. And so it's one more thing you're being charged for that isn't going to help your argument. I would definitely use the Woodcock-Johnson. Yeah.
Okay.
Cindy's poo-pooing the Nelson-Denny too. Sorry, Nelson and Denny, whoever you are. Okay. Brian, I don't understand your question. Maybe you could ask it aloud. You should be able to, I think once we unmute you, we trust that you're—
Sure. So I had an example a few months ago of a student who was HIV positive, and he got denied from a professional board for his extended time. And, you know, if it had been an LD, you know, I would know what to tell him to do. The guidance I gave him was to meet with his specialist and his specialist team and have them write specifically the barriers he was experiencing around timing and processing and things like that. But I think at least I feel weaker in understanding how to support folks who may not have either an LD or reading disability or psychological disability. And I think there's a whole plethora of things that we have to figure out how to support people in making those applications successfully.
Yeah, I think, you know, for chronic health, usually it's fairly straightforward, right? It's additional breaks, it's access to water, it's a secondary impairment from a medication regimen. It's you know, it could be secondary symptoms of being lethargic, having some other sort of interruption for the test environment that causes the test to be distributed over multiple days, things of that nature. So I think that the updated guide is really going to provide a lot of support, but I wonder, I'll have to go back to the chapter now and see what we said about chronic health. I know we do cover it in our training, but I'll go back and see what the chapter says. So Kristina, you want to move on? I noticed that we've got like 12 minutes.
Sure. Let's go to question 5. This will talk a little bit. Some of what we've just discussed will overlap a little bit, but the institutional letter of support for a student's application for accommodation on a board exam can help by highlighting all the pieces of documentation that support the student's need for accommodation, some of which, again, we just spoke about. What are some of the key points that should be included in an institution's letter of support? Anybody have thoughts on that? We've got Brian again. I think you can go ahead and talk, Brian.
Sorry, my hand was still up from before.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Brian. You're a go-to guy today. So anybody have any thoughts on this? Institutional letters of support, you know, even looking at just the advice from the book. Erica, we've got.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Erica.
So I really appreciated the outline that you guys put in the book, just because this is only a few months in that I'm in this job. So it was really helpful. And also, having gone through the process with Megan, it was really helpful as well. So basically, how the person would be in relationship with the student, as well as what the person does themselves, say the DRP and what they do and what they have been doing with the student, as well as what the accommodations that the student has currently been given at the institution that they're at, and why they should be given accommodations for the exam, or just a few of those things. So.
That's great. Thank you. Yes. And of course, focusing on the functional limitations, kind of a lot of the stuff we've talked about in the previous question, making sure to really focus on the specific barriers to this exam, right, that they'll experience, and how the required accommodation will allow them to level the playing field. And so focusing on barriers, functional limitations, which major life activities, using the language of the ADA amendments of 2008, so that we, are speaking their language a little bit. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Looks like Terry is also here. Okay, great. Terry, I think you're ready to speak if you're up for it. Welcome back.
Thank you. I've found to have more success when the institutional letter of support comes from faculty instead of me. Definitely ghostwriting goes on, but the faculty, especially if the accommodation started in medical school, they talk about how they would meet with a student, felt very comfortable about their knowledge. The student was able to demonstrate so many different skills, but then on the exam, with the time restriction, they saw how the exam was blocking them from demonstrating that same knowledge. And knock on wood, we've been more successful with those letters coming from faculty than from my office.
Interesting. Can I ask, Terry, what kind of faculty are you seeking out to kind of help with these letters?
From the basic science faculty, generally is faculty that work with them in their M1 year, who saw them struggling when they came to the office and said, I need help, and started the whole process for having the student identified. These are two students who had never been officially identified in the past. They had received informal accommodations in undergrad, and so they had to go through the whole process. So we needed to have some really strong support to get those accommodations, since there had not been anything done prior to med school.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the late diagnoses, right? And I would guess then the basic scientists, just like what you're saying, they were able to sort of see them in the classroom in real time and can vouch for some of the barriers that they experience.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where I was able to definitely identify barriers. The things I saw it in one setting, but I could not assess it in the written exam.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Lisa, would you like to, should we shift gears, or?
Do I have an opinion? No, I would say that it's helpful when, as described, it is somebody who is observed the student and can speak to that before and after. Kristina and I were talking about that the other day. Outside of that, if it's just going to be somebody who talks about what a great student this is and how worthy they are of, that's not going to help. And I would say the best combination is having a DRP letter and that letter of support. And then making sure that your dean, assistant dean, whomever is supporting you to use really strong language in your letters. So let's see, an application timeline checklist can be created for each certification, licensing, and board exam relevant to programs offered at your institution. And you can give these to students in day one when they come in so that they are not taken by surprise. I had a student the other day completely taken by surprise, thinking it would take a week to get accommodations on the NBME. That is not going to happen. How might such a document assist students in meeting deadlines and putting their best application forward? How might such a document also assist staff and in your office in supporting students and helping them achieve their goals?
So we heard a lot from Marie about this. Does anybody have any additional thoughts after kind of hearing Marie's outline? Ooh, we've got Emily. Here we go. Let's see.
Emily.
Hi, Emily.
Hi. So I am a new disability resource professional in the health sciences world, so I'm very happy to be here. But I think that document to assist students is really just to have that hard copy and to be able to see and to reference that and to continually be able to go back and reference that. And I think as well, having the staff having that same document so that you're speaking the same language and you're able to look at the exact same information and make sure that you're both on the same page. And that if there are any questions or any concerns, that you're able to identify those, especially early, so that they don't continue to fester or don't affect the student once they do get much closer to that deadline time.
Thanks so much, Emily. Emily's going to be a rock star in the health professions world. Just watch out. She is at Colorado with our new team, and she's going to be great. So one thing I would say is make it a checklist and then keep the deadlines going. And to what Marie said, and Laura Riley is saying the same thing, it helps the students process the information. It gives them some organization, about the thing. Sending them to a website may be completely overwhelming on their specific disability. It may be an exercise in futility. So giving them a checklist with these dates, but I would also add back to what Marie was saying, and this is the way that I operated at UCSF. I had those days in my calendar. If I told a student they needed, draft one of their letter by this date, that date was in my calendar. An email went out to all students, first year students, let's say, and said, okay, let's set a time to meet to go over your essay. So, I think it helps everybody stay organized, and it also sets expectations, which we all know I love, just setting those expectations for who's doing what, when, where, and how. All right. Are we ready to go on to 7?
Well, Lisa, we only have 2 more minutes, and we did promise Marie that we would talk about appeals. I'm wondering, should we go to 8 so we don't break our promise to Marie?
We do not want to upset Marie.
I don't know. I'm torn because this one, 7's really good too, but 8's appeals, and Marie specifically asked about appeals. Up to you. It's your show, Lisa.
Not my show. Marie, hit it. Question 8. Go for it.
All right. Generally, in order to win an appeal after an accommodation request was denied, students must address the concerns raised in the denial letter by providing additional documentation. Although each appeal is individualized, what types of additional documentation may provide such support during an appeal, and how might students obtain this support? Any thoughts on appeals before we have to sign off? Oh, here comes Marie.
I'm making this the Marie show apparently today. I apologize.
Hey, you're a special guest.
I think, I found with some of the denial letters that I received that it provided us guided information that they were really seeking. 2 things I found. One, that sometimes when you get the denial letters, I have found that the information they're giving me was inaccurate, and they didn't even read the student's letter, and they gave incorrect gender pronouns and wrong diagnoses. So you can really quickly counter back and state, well, we can address that if you would go to page 3, section 2, and review the diagnostic where it says the diagnosis. So errors do happen on their end. It does. It's happened to me twice at Rush. The other thing is when they do write that denial letter, it will say this was what was lacking or missing. And if that student still has that relationship with their evaluator, they can send that right back to them and say, can you elaborate more on this? But again, it's the time constraint. And I think that's where a lot of us get stressed out. And so do the students, because these reviews can take, 6 to 9 weeks. And they have to have them done, I don't know about every other institution, by a certain date. So, the sooner the students can turn in that original request for the NBME, that's ideal. But I haven't found denial letters from my other colleges. It was pretty straightforward with the other entities, but within the USMLE, they were so like, this was what was lacking. It didn't meet our criteria. you can provide supporting documentation by doing this. So they're telling you what exactly to do, which is great. You just follow that. But if you already submitted it, you also can write back and say, please turn to this page, which I've done before too.
Wonderful suggestions. Anybody have anything else they want to add? I mean, the big piece of this is absolutely what Marie said, is reading the denial letter line by line. And if there is an appeal to be had, you have to really respond to it line by line, and not be afraid to, just like they quote you and quote the personal statement and quote all the medical documentation, don't be afraid to quote them and then respond back to what they're saying as well. And I see Elisa's here to keep our time honest.
I want to
Yes.
make one comment. There was someone who posted a question in there. I don't want you to think that we're ignoring you. It's far more complicated, and giving advice on a specific case is difficult to do. What I would say is that if you don't apply for accommodations, you have no recourse to argue that you didn't do well because you were a person with a disability that didn't have access. So you get rid of any kind of, and this is not legal advice, but I think you get rid of any kind of argument that you could make or any further action that you could take. So that's what I'll say about that without going into too much detail. And then, yeah, you guys are rock stars, like literally rock stars. I love the crowdsourcing. I love the community feel, and you guys are so comfortable with this. And I hope that after we get done with this book, we can choose another book. Judy Human has a new book. Alice Wong has a new book. I'm loving this community feel and a way for people to share what they know. So
Well,
thank you for joining us.
Thank you both so much for sharing what you know. And I know all of our attendees today really appreciate that. So we do need to respect time, especially for the captionist who's here working this whole hour alone. So
Thank you.
So that said, we will take leave of everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for attending. And this recording will be posted fairly shortly, and keep an eye out for it. Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.